Welcome to this video about Step 8, a new sequential tracking sampling register by Joranalogue Audio Design. I actually just finished installing Step 8 into my case. I haven't played around with it at all, so I'm not sure what to expect. I thought it would be fun and interesting to turn it on camera and just play around with it to see what I can do with this. Here we go. So first of all, of course, there's no sound coming from this. I wasn't sure if I needed to patch a clock into the input or into the step input, but for the module to work this way, it's the step input you need. Let's patch up generate here into the mixer. So I've noticed these switches, but I don't know what they do. As you can see, switching this one to solo, it isolates the one step, but it's cycling through them. If I switch this to all the steps are active. But I really want to know if there's any output that outputs the steps like a sequencer would. So this is an output. Try this one. And I think this is the right one for the module to kind of act like a sequencer. And of course you can perfectly use this as a sequencer, but the outputs are not quantized. Now what happens when I switch the switch to all? Nothing. It keeps cycling through the steps. Okay, that's good to know. But if I switch this last switch here from track to sample, no. I thought it would act like a sample and hold, but I guess for that to work you need to send in a voltage anyway. So we need the first switch, there's cycle and shift. So again, while we're listening to the scan output while triggering the step input with a clock from Pamela, these switches actually don't affect anything, at least not anything we can hear at this point. As I expected, this knob steps through the steps, so I guess if I remove the clock and I just use this knob, or button I should say, we can just step through the steps of step 8 manually. So okay, that kind of works out. Now let's try sending in control voltage. I'm just using orbit 8. Let's send this one here. So I guess this is the track and hold function. When we patch a voltage into this, it lets the voltage through, but when it switches over to the next step, it holds the voltage for a moment. And step 8, just as I expected, when we switch this to sample, step 8 kind of becomes a sequenced sample and hold with attenuators for every step. see when I slide these down, the output voltage will always be 0, even though there is some kind of voltage going in at that moment. Let's change the clock rate here. Just so we have something that's a little bit different. Let's change the tuning and the timbre of the VCO. So we can make kind of this pattern. Okay. I kind of want to patch up a delay. Maybe I shouldn't, but I'm going to anyway. So this is just a mono delay coming from the memory boy. Let's play around with the rate of orbit. Now what happens when I switch this switch? I have no idea, but it sounds really interesting. So I guess it's blatantly obvious that I have no clue what I'm doing. At this point, I will have to have a read through the manual with the module in front of me. That's always a good idea. For now, I'm just having fun discovering a few things, at least on my own. I'm curious what these analog outputs do. Let's use one of them. Actually, let me do it like this. So right now I'm using the scan output into the volt productive input into channel 3. If that wasn't already clear, let's just use the 5th analog output. I have no clue what's happening here, but it's fascinating altogether. So let's use one of the gate outputs into the frequency modulation input of channel 3. So if we remove this one, so this is just sending out a gate, but I've patched it into the exponential FM input so I can regulate how much this gate changes the pitch. Let's use this one as well. Now what happens when we remove the input of orbit? So the gate output is still active, even though I've turned down the sliders. So So I guess this one always sends out a gate whenever step 8 is on that step. Interesting. Let's remove the clock. So the LED at the bottom here for the gate outputs gives us a useful visual representation of what step we are on, because when these sliders are down, at least in this setting, none of these LEDs light up unless I move them, and the step needs to be active. Looking at the LEDs below, you can always be sure of what step you're on. We remove all this. So this is the cable that's going into the volt per octave input on Generate 3. And if I patch it into the first of the analog outputs, that's what you would expect, right? But if I go to step 2, this isn't sending out anything. Even though I'm moving the slider, nothing happens until I go to that step. But by switching to the all position of this middle switch, pretty sure. So now we're on step 1. The cable is plugged into step 2. So in this mode, solo, this one is not sending out any voltage, but in the all setting, it is active. So okay, I discovered what the track and sample are for, kinda. I discovered what solo and all are for. Now I just need to make sense of what the cycle and the shift option stand for. Let's go to solo again, because of course all these influence each other, I'm sure, and there's plenty of combinations possible. So I'm patching up the first analog output again into the volt per octave input of Generate. And let me step through the steps manually. Or even better, let's go back to the scan output. Okay, so when we go to cycle, what has changed? Nothing so far. So now this cycle or shift setting, it's really elusive to me. Let's patch the clock back in. Maybe that. Of course the track and the sample are not doing anything at all right now. The solo and the all isn't really affecting the scan output. So one more thing I want to try is sending in an audio rate signal. It should be able to handle signals well up into audio rate and higher. So let's use the sine output of another VCO. So step 8 is ideal for making chiptune. No, just kidding. I actually should hook up a scope, but this is really just my first experience with step 8. And of course, after I've done some research and some experimenting, I'll do a thorough video explaining what all the different switches, sliders, inputs and outputs do. But for now I'm just switching switches moving sliders. Well, of course I need to patch this one into a separate input of the mixer as well. Let's turn it up into audio rate. And as I expected, it sounds like a square wave. So now I'm using step 8 as kind of a custom VCO, really. Let me use Moskwa 2 here to sequence the oscillator that's stepping through the steps. Now I wonder what happens now when I patch some CV signal from orbit 3 into one of the into this input, of course. I keep thinking these are inputs, but they aren't. So this affects every step. I guess I kind of made a dubstep bass with step 8. I'll leave it at this for this first experience video. I'll be back soon with a little more understanding about step 8. I'm sure I won't keep myself from posting a few patches before I release the full in-depth video that I, of course, still have to make. I hope you enjoy this kind of blind dive into step 8, a new sequential tracking sampling register. I'm really just reading what's on the label here by Joranalogue Audio Design. Thanks for watching. Bye.